Hello friends, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Ajay Solkhe, presently working as Assistant Professor, University School of Management, Kurukshetra University, Kurukshetra, Haryana. Talking about the contents of this module, here we'll be discussing role of the three actors in industrial relations system, in which we are going to discuss the roles of management, workers union, the government. Secondly, we will be discussing the changes in the roles of traditional actors, how the government role has been changed, trade union and employers has been changed. Subsequently, we will be discussing emerging new actors in industrial relations system. What are the key changes in modern industrial relations dynamics? Upon completion of this module, a student should be able to understand the traditional roles of various actors in industrial relations system and the changes in their roles due to various forces of contemporary business environment. Traditionally, industrial relations was the concern of the three principal actors: workers and their unions, managers, employers, and lastly, the regulator, that is the government. In the present scenario, there has been an advent of new players and new dynamics in the industrial relations system. In the post-liberalization, globalization era, consumers and the community have begun to assert themselves and play a significant role. Role of the three actors in industrial relations system. The three actors, that is the management, workers union, government, they play different kind of roles and endorse different kind of ideologies over a period of time. Management, we have four kind of styles. Very first is exploitative authoritarian system, benevolent authoritarianism, consultative style and participative style. From the side of the workers, some of the times they are sectional bargainers, some of the time they play a role like class bargainers, Ascent of the state, partners in social control, and some of the times they endorse ideology of the enemy of the system. Government, being a regulator, adopt 5 different frames of ideologies. One is Laissez-faire Philosophy, second is Paternalism, third is Tripartism, fourth is Voluntarism, and lastly Interventionism. The exploitative authoritarianism system. Now, this style of management was introduced in India by the colonial elite who set up modern industries during the 19th century. To this colonial elite, labor was nothing more than a commodity. Labor was exploited ruthlessly, wages paid barely provided subsistence, with no job security and no welfare amenities. Benevolent authoritarianism. The aforesaid style of management gave place to what may be called benevolent authoritarianism. The typical Indian business magnate finds this style of management congenial to his way of thinking. This style has survived until today and it believes in labor welfare. But this style does not concede to the labor's privilege of having a say in their own affairs. Consultative style. Now, this is formally the prevailing management style in the public limited companies, in foreign concerns operating in India and in the public sector enterprises. Participative style. Under this style, labor is no longer a commodity or a child or a so-called adult employee, but it is a friend, an ally and a partner in the joint endeavor to improve the inactive efficiency of the enterprise. This style of management is not yet well developed in India. Sectional bargainers. Now, this is the most widely accepted role of the trade unions. They represent the interest of the workers and bargain with the management. Class bargainers. In certain countries like France, where national bargaining takes place, covering all industrial occupations, trade unions and their federations play this role. In France, farmers have their own nationwide unions, so do the civil servants. The national bargaining takes place from time to time to determine the share of each class in the gross national product. In India, we have now only the beginning of this process in respect of few industries. Example is steel industry, jute, engineering, and similar other. Ascent of the state. This is the role of the trade unions in socialist countries like the erstwhile USSR. Here, the trade union is identified with the state apparatus and has well-defined role in ensuring the fulfillment of target of production at the enterprise level. This type of identification with the state machinery is not to be found outside the socialist world. In democratic countries, at times, these unions represent the philosophy of the ruling parties. In India, major unions have political affiliations. Partners in social control. This type is exemplified in the system of co-determination in West Germany. What happens in this system is the representatives of the workers sit on the boards of management and they participate in all kinds of decision making. There is a beginning of this in India. Enemy of the system. In all democratic countries, there are unions which subscribe to the Marxist theory of class war. Trade unions are not merely a form of economic system, but they are designed to bring about a wholesale change in the existing economic system. Unions would encourage excessive consumption aspirations of workers, that is, higher and higher wages, to bring about a state of labor unrest, contributing to the disintegration of the social order. Laissez-faire policy. Under this system, the government follows a laissez-faire attitude to labor management alone to settle a dispute. In a society where the labor was economically weak and did not have a strong organization of their own, meant that the government was on the side of employers. During the 19th century, governments almost everywhere followed this attitude, but with the end of laissez-faire, this attitude has become outdated. Owing to the revolutionary ideas of men like Ruskin, Owen and others in United Kingdom, and agitation by social reformers in UK and India, government assumed a paternalistic attitude towards labor. A series of protective laws were enacted regulating working conditions, payment of wages, and gave them certain benefits in case of industrial injuries. Tripartism. Even before India attained independence, tripartite form of consultation existed before making any sort of policy decision. Voluntarism. Voluntary arbitration is officially encouraged but has not taken root in India. The government involved a series of codes to regulate labor management relations on a voluntary basis. As a result, came the code of discipline, the code of conduct, and the code of efficiency and welfare. Interventionism. Along with tripartism and voluntarism, government intervened in labor disputes through the process of conciliation and adjudication. Industrial strife leads to loss of production which the government can hardly afford to ignore, and so it came forward with its legislative machinery to prevent industrial dispute. What are the changes in roles of traditional actors? Now, slides unfolded from this slide onwards will throw light on some of the changes which came across in the roles of the traditional actors of industrial relation. Over a period of time, a number of changes have taken place in the industrial relations scenario. Not only have the players changed, the inclusion of consumers in the community, techniques, technology, and power structures, they have been re-examined and altered time and again. Changes in roles of traditional actors. The role of the government will be discussed, role of the trade union will be discussed, and the role of employers will be discussed. Role of government will be examined. The government's regulatory role will continue to be important in the unorganized sector. The Second National Labour Commission was asked, among others, to specially recommend an umbrella legislation for the unorganized sector. In the organized sector, the government has to play an enabling facilitative role. Similarly, the government has a long way to go in dealing with the twin problems of poverty and unemployment, underemployment, eradicating such social ills as child labor and bonded labor, and dealing effectively with workplace health and hygiene issues, including HIV/AIDS. The pressure to attract investment and create jobs is resulting in certain states adopting competitive labor policies that are leading to the erosion of existing trade union rights and annulling accumulated benefits. The concern about inferior conditions of work, exemption from trade union rights, would recede in a liberalized environment, whereas the rationale for the setting up of export processing zones and 100% export units became archaic. In many respects, the present labor laws have become obsolete. There is a need for comprehensive revision of labor laws. This task must be taken in hand in consultation with the social partners and other interests affected. The recommendations of the Second National Commission on Labour on simplification and rationalization need to be considered and acted upon in right earnest. As discussed in the earlier chapters, there is also a need to create a separate cadre of labour judiciary. Labour cases should be settled in expeditious, time-bound framework. The government should ratify the basic convention of the ILO concerning freedom of association and the right to collective bargaining. The approach to international labour standards should be to prevent unfair labour competition based on low wages and poor working conditions within interrupting growth and productive employment. Talking about the role of the trade unions, trade union membership in traditional industries is declining, and organizing new members in new high-tech industries raises special problems. The recent incidents in multinational company refer to the Honda case, and the persistent problems in BPOs points to new emerging issues in unionization, even in sectors where hitherto at least more employers and employees felt it was not necessary to unionize. Trade unions, they need to develop new strategies and competencies to initiate organizing drives. Trade unions, MET, is the need of the hour, and already there are several instances of issue-based cooperation among trade unions. Trade unions, they should focus on managing the expectations of the successive new generations of workers rather than being content with their role in situations of discontent. There is a need for greater democratization in the functioning of trade unions. With the growing sickness in Indian industry, the role of the trade union field worker is changing. National centers of trade unions, they are becoming hospitals for nursing sick units. Union activists, they need to spend more time scanning the environmental changes, diagnosing the level of performance of economy, industry and the enterprise level, liaising with the banks, financial institutions, courts and similar other factors, rather than merely concentrating on the relations with the members and the employers. Lastly, the role of employers. In the new context, heavier responsibilities fall on employers and their organizations. Some need to give greater attention to empowerment rather than exploitation of human resources. Building skills and giving the workforce greater say and stake in the enterprise becomes imperative. Employers, they are beginning to involve workers through small group activities and empowering them. In the new economic environment, the distinction between employers' organizations and chambers of commerce industry associations is likely to diminish. There is a need for these organizations to take holistic approaches. The effect of the changes on the employer's organization to take holistic approaches, the effects of changes on the employer's organization would not be uniform. In some, such as in declining industries and traditional industries which are subject to intensive competition, their role will either decline or significantly change relative to their previous one. There are also indications that some of them may take up activities, responsibilities that were once handled by the government and even discharge quasi-governmental functions, as is already happening in the Goa Mineral Ore Exporters Association. Talking about the emerging new actors in industrial relations system, over a period of time we have seen a trend that there are so many other actors also actively playing a significant role in this industrial relations system. The very first of all is consumers and the community. They have emerged as the new actors on the horizon of industrial relations. since they represent the larger aggregations of population and wider societal interest. When the rights are impinged upon by the action or inaction of either employees or employers, the courts, consumer courts to the Supreme Court, rule that the interest of the workers and management should take a back seat. The power dynamic in industrial relation has shifted. Now this make it easier for the concerned parties, be it employer or employees, to move away from narrow, selfish and sectional agenda and articulate their concerns in much broader terms so that they align themselves with other stakeholders in society and find a new equilibrium or dynamic to influence the outcomes. Changes in modern industrial relations dynamics. In a general way, conventional notions about industrial relations as relations between management and unions will undergo substantial changes. Increasingly, customer focus, both internal and external, will tend to be a decisive factor. Non-union firms are likely to proliferate in the future. The plurality of industrial relations will seen not merely in terms of the organized and the unorganized, but also union and non-union firms, and firms and industries in different stages of business cycles. Industrial relations will increasingly be driven by the contextual factors at the micro level, even as macro aspects continue to influence the inputs, labor institutions, structures, processes, and outputs. The field of industrial relations will thus have a wider scope so that it comes to be referred to as employment relations, covering the entire gamut of employment. The changing nature of work, changing profiles of employees, and the ascendancy of managerial power through technology and market-oriented policies of the state means that trade unions have to search for a new form and structure for maintained voice and representation. In the past, industrial relations they were shaped by the legislative effort of the state, rule making through interactions between workers and their organizations or employers in the organizations, and arbitration adjudication by courts. Career shifts through self-reliance and resilience seem to be the order, with working conditions being legislated and wages being market driven. The trade union's role will be mostly in terms of protecting the employee against arbitrary dismissals. The basic philosophy of industrial relations may not change with changes in industrial strategies, but the underlying strategies and the tactics of the social partners will. The central to the philosophy of future industrial relations will be the core values such as your equity, fairness, exercise of power and authority, notions about individuality and collectivism, trust and transparency, and efficiently and equity. Here, competition and globalization they need high performance organization. Moreover, employees who man such organizations will have new demographic and social characteristics and new and higher expectations. The major changes in employment relations, industrial relations will be with regard to the following four dimensions. First is flexible and adaptive work organization, continued emphasis on the development of skills and competences, contingent compensation systems, and workplace governance that recognizes the need for increased say and stake for the employees at all levels as well as the job satisfaction. Friends, I hope you have understood the contents well. You can also refer to other quadrants of this module for testing your knowledge and having some more input on theme of the module. Happy learning.